Hello, I see a few people out there. Can you hear me okay? If you can, type in the comments there and let me know you can hear everything just fine. All right. Well, I think everything's working well. So hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Eliot, the IELTS expert at Magoosh. And I'm here this morning. Well, it's morning for me. I'm not sure what it is for you where you are, but I'm going to answer your IELTS questions and happy to answer any question you have about the test. So if you have a question, go ahead and type it to us in the over to the right there, and you can see the comment area. And I'll try to answer everybody all your questions. I'll try to get to each one as much as possible. We're going to go here for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll take a little break, and then we'll finish out the hour. So stick around, ask all your questions. I'm here to answer whatever you want to know. Okay, so we have the first question coming in here. So question number 1, should I take the academic or general training IELTS exam? That depends on what you're planning to do and what the institution that you're applying to, or whatever it is you're trying to do with the test. It depends on what they require. Okay, so if you are taking, applying to school, college, or graduate school, you will almost always have to take the academic test. I don't know of any academic institutions that accept the general training exam. But if you're applying for a job or immigration to Canada or Australia or some other country that accepts the IELTS exam for language proficiency, it's likely you will take the general training test. Okay, so it's very important to know what you're supposed to take. So you should look at the requirements of the place that you're applying to, or whatever it is you're taking the test for, and they will give you that information. Okay, so we've got some more questions. Now we're going to switch over. Second question. How can I ensure time management in the IELTS reading section? That is a very, very important question, and many of my students have that same question. And the reason is that it's very hard. As you know, time management on the reading section is extremely tough. The key is that, well, first of all, you should not read carefully each of the reading passages. That sounds like funny advice, but it's true. If you read very carefully, like you would in school, if you're reading an essay or a paper for school, you're going to read it slowly. You're going to try to understand everything very well, and so that, you know, when the teacher gives you a test on it, you know the answers. Well, you're not memorizing or really learning answers by reading for the IELTS. You're trying to find answers to their questions. So a key, absolute key, is to learn skimming and scanning skills. Okay, so you're skimming for answers. You're skimming the reading passages, trying to get the basic idea, try to understand the organization of the passages, right? You go about 2 or 3 minutes through each one when you first get to the reading passage, and you're trying to just get an idea of what's there. Then you go to the questions and you look at them carefully. You try to understand what they're asking for, and then you go back to the passage and you try to scan for those answers as quickly as possible, okay? This is not easy. It takes practice. You're going to have to practice with IELTS, practice questions, mock tests, skimming and scanning skills. And if you want to know more about that, if you look on our blog, Magoosh IELTS blog, there is a guide to the reading section, and I talk more in that guide about how to skim and scan, and that will give you a good idea of how to do that if that's a new idea for you. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Next question. I find myself struggling with matching headings questions and wasting a lot of time. Any tips on how to find the main idea of paragraphs? Okay, yeah. Matching headings questions are difficult. So how do you find the main idea? Well, it's related to what we were talking about just now. Um, Most of the time, okay, you can find the general main idea of a passage by looking at the first few lines of the paragraph, the first sentence or two. You may be able to go then down and skim through and just look at what other information is found in each passage there. But for matching headings questions, what I find is, okay, it's sometimes it's really hard for students to find the main idea of the paragraph. Other times, the difficulty is simply having trouble understanding the paraphrases for the sentences that or the phrases you're supposed to use for the headings, right? So understanding really well exactly what it means, each of the choices means for your answers. Okay, so to underline and take notes. If you're taking the paper-based test especially, this is easy to do, okay? And when you have matching headings questions, focus on those first few lines, okay, of each paragraph, underline the key words there, and see if you can find just in general what the major idea in that paragraph is. Are they talking about a sequence of things? Are they comparing two things? Are they making an argument about something, right? Is this a argumentative essay? Okay, you just try to notice what that is, and understanding and recognizing those functions of those paragraphs helps you to recognize the same thing in the little headings that they give you, your answer choices, okay? Because very often what they're trying to do is see if you recognize that the major idea there is exactly the same between those headings and the paragraph. Okay, so practice that. Okay, I talked about the paper-based or computer-based, and here's a new question. Many students have this question about whether or not you should take the paper-based or the computer-based version of the IELTS exam. This is a great question, and one that I encourage all of you to think about. If you have the computer-based version of the test available to you in your region, that's great. But the computer-based test is not perfect for everyone, okay? So don't just assume the computer-based test is better. It is better for some people. Okay, so let's talk about that. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the two? So one basic thing is that the paper-based test tends to be administered in sort of a large testing room. You're sitting with lots and lots of other people, right, in many places. Okay, not everywhere, but many testing centers are sort of these large places with lots of people. You're sort of sitting near someone. You can hear them, as they're working, and that bothers a lot of people, and that can be kind of stressful. The computer-based test is more private. You have a little area all to yourself. You can many people find it easier to focus on the computer-based area. So if you're someone who is distracted easily by other people, if that's going to make you perform worse on the test, then maybe the computer-based test is the right option for you. Okay, but there are some more important things here. If you are someone who struggles on the writing section, okay, and that's many students, that's the hardest section for them, right? Because you only have 1 hour to finish the section, and it's a lot of writing to do in 1 hour, even for very, very proficient writers, okay? So the question here is, are you faster at typing, or are you faster at writing by hand? Okay, so for me, I'll say that I'm much, much, much faster typing. And I like to write essays on computers because I can delete things really fast. I can move, sometimes you want to move paragraphs, ideas around a little bit. And on a computer, that's easy to do. When you have a pencil and paper, you're erasing, and you just maybe even avoid editing because it's so hard to do, and it just makes everything look all sloppy and everything. It's just not nice to do on a piece of paper. So for many students who are struggling with time, and if and editing is something that it is difficult for you to do on paper, then I think the computer-based test could give you a real advantage there. Okay. Now, there's another group of students that have something different to consider. If the listening section is very hard for you, then in some ways the paper-based test is better. Okay, because at the end of the paper-based test, you have a 10-minute time period where you can go back through the whole test and check your answers. You can even, if you left a few answers blank, you can fill them in. Okay, and there's a little bit of time to transfer your answers from your test booklet over to your final answer sheet. Okay, so that time can be very valuable for students who struggle on the listening test in particular. Okay, on the computer-based test, you don't have that 10-minute period. They only give you about, I think, 2 minutes at the end, which is really not much time to go back through your answers. You're supposed to use that time to just check spelling quickly or something like that. Okay, so for the people out there who are struggling on the listening section, you might consider the paper-based version. Okay. Otherwise, I should have said this earlier. Otherwise, just keep in mind the questions are the same between the two versions of the test. The questions are not going to be harder from one version or the other. It's just simply some of the format issues that are things you should take into consideration. Okay, so think about the test center, think about the writing and listening section in particular, and what is going to help you to do the best and get the best score you can. Okay. All right. Right. So we've got a question about writing. So the very general question: what are my top writing tips? Okay. Well, one of the things you can do to really prepare and get ready for the test, if you have a few weeks, maybe you have a few months, is to write with a timer as much as possible. Okay, so you should be trying to write things within 20 minutes, right? Your task one, whether you're taking general training or academic, it should only take you about 20 minutes. Now, I'll tell you honestly, I'm a native English speaker and I can answer all of the IELTS questions easily. But for 20 minutes, having only 20 minutes to write, that's tough for anyone to do, okay? It's tough to come up with ideas. It's tough to say things, even in your own language, that are clear and that make sense, okay, in such a short time. So it takes practice. You need to practice with a timer when you're practicing writing. Okay, for your task 2 essays, you have longer, right? You should take about 40 minutes for those. And if you're just starting out, maybe you've got a few months and before the test, and you just want to master kind of the organization and strategy of those writing tasks. Okay, you can take longer and you can spend more time on them. But as you're getting closer and closer to the test, make sure you are timing yourself very strictly and staying within those time limits. That's one of the main things I hear from students, is that when they actually get to test day and they take the real exam, if they have not been practicing with a timer, then their timing is off on test day and they don't get as much written, or they don't save enough time for editing. Okay, so that's my number one piece of advice. Secondly, go to some of the strategies that we have lots of strategies on our Magoosh lesson videos. We also have, again, I talked about the Magoosh IELTS blog earlier. We have complete guides to the writing section there. And in those guides, we talk about how to answer each type of question. Okay, so we've got, advantage, disadvantage type task 2 questions, right? Where you're supposed to talk about, the advantages or disadvantages of a particular thing. There are a number of other styles of essays that you'll write for both tasks. Master those, know what to expect. There's only a few kinds of them, so you might as well know them very, very well, and to understand how you should organize your response. Okay, so that would be another tip, a basic tip that you should definitely do before test day, is to spend some time studying the organization of these essays. So you don't have to think about it on exam day. You just have to think about the ideas you want to talk about, and you're going to not really have to spend a lot of time thinking about how to organize them when you write. Okay, let's see, another question here. Let's see, how are academic and general IELTS, okay, so how are the academic IELTS and the general training IELTS exam different in terms of difficulty level for all 4 sections? Okay, so for the listening and speaking section, they are not different at all. Okay, there's 0 difference. So listening and speaking is exactly the section that has the greatest differences. Okay, and it is quite a bit easier. At least part of it is quite a bit easier than the academic test. On the general training reading exam, you get the first few passages you're going to read are shorter than the academic reading passages, and they're about easier topics. They're sort of about daily life things. So you might see, for example, some signs that you would find out on the street, okay? Or maybe it could be like an itinerary or a schedule for a business, right? When they're open, or what services they provide at what time of day, something like that. Okay, rules are often something they post, right? So in the middle section of the reading paper, all of the topics are going to be about the workplace. Okay, so you're going to start off with daily life passages, and then it moves to workplace related passages. Those are also easier than the academic passages, a little bit shorter, and they deal with things that you would encounter on the job at work. Okay, so I would say, compared to the academic paper, on the academic reading paper, you have 3 challenging academic reading passages you have to read for the paper. So that's quite tough. Timing is harder on the academic reading section because of all that material you need to read. Okay, so I would say that's the greatest difference in terms of difficulty level. The writing section, task 2 on the writing section is basically exactly the same. You have to write a 5-paragraph essay to a topic they provide. It's task 1 that's different. And on the general training exam, it is a little bit easier. Task 1, you have to write a letter to a friend. They tell you who you need to write to. It could be a colleague, a friend, somebody in like the mayor of your city. Okay, they'll tell you the topic and who to write to. And so again, it's an example of sort of daily life English compared to the academic task 1, where you have to write a report. And they're going to give you some visuals like graphs or charts or whatever, and you have to write a report on what you see. That's a pretty challenging exercise. So there's a difference there between the 2 exercises. But the general training exam, yes, it is. It has some more daily life, more basic English, but it's still challenging, and you still definitely need to take time to prepare, depending on how much you need to improve to get the score you need. Okay. Let's see, next question. Oh, good one here for the speaking segment. Yes, that's a major question for a lot of students. If you're self-studying, how can you practice for the speaking section? Okay, a couple of things. First of all, if at all possible, this is the time when you're preparing for the IELTS exam. Now is the time to go see if you can find someone in your community or online who's willing to speak English to you for a little bit each week. If you can just practice for a half hour, maybe 2 times a week, where you're speaking English, that is a huge, huge thing. Okay, it will really benefit you. Now, I know that's easier said than done, as we say. It's easier to talk about that, and I know for many of our students, it's difficult to find someone out there. Okay, so what do you do in that case? Well, do you have someone that you know whose English is about as good as yours, or maybe better? Okay, maybe they're not a native speaker. But if you can practice your English with someone, even if they're not a native speaker, that fluency practice will help. And fluency is like exercise, okay? If you're going to run a race, okay, it doesn't matter if you could run the same distance a year ago. If you haven't been training, you're not going to be able to run the same speed today. Okay, you need to practice and keep your fluency going. And a great way to do that is just to practice with someone else who speaks English. Okay, so we also at Magoosh, we have a Speaking Partners Facebook group. If you're on Facebook, we can connect you to that. I think we can put a link to that below to give you information about that. But I think if you Google Magoosh speaking community speaking group, we can connect you with other IELTS learners, other people studying for the IELTS who want to practice speaking. That's a great opportunity if you can't find a native speaker, or even if you can. It's extra practice, and you can give each other feedback. Okay. All right, now I know some of you out there will be like, well, I don't think I know anybody, or I'm not sure I want to join a Facebook group. Okay, you can still get IELTS questions. Okay, so again, we have back to the blog here, where we have lots of free, anything on our blog is free for all of you, by the way. So I'm talking about our blog. We've got lots and lots of free materials if you look at Magoosh IELTS blog. Okay, and one of them is speaking topics. So we have posted lots and lots and lots of practice IELTS speaking questions. And you can get someone to ask those questions to you, okay? And you have to try to respond and practice, okay? Record yourself, listen, go back through and listen to yourself and try to find the mistakes you made. Think about how you could answer the question better next time. Even if the person asking you the questions doesn't speak English very well, they can still ask you questions that'll be a very similar format to the actual IELTS exam, and that will help you. Okay, so if you have nobody else who can speak English around you that you can practice with, that would be my recommendation. Okay, so again, go to the blog and find those practice questions. Even if you're not going to practice with them with another person, they're good to read over so you can think about how you would respond to the types of questions you'll get on the speaking section. Okay. Okay, let's see. So tell me about section 2 of the speaking test. I'm taking the test tomorrow. Okay. Well, try to relax. Okay. Just take a few deep breaths. You're going to do great. Okay. So first of all, give yourself some positive words and positive thoughts, and definitely try to get some sleep before the test. Section 2 of the speaking test is the part of the speaking exam where you are going to give a kind of short speech, okay? The examiner is going to give you a topic, and you have about 1 minute to think about how you would respond to the topic, and then the examiner is going to tell you that you need to respond, okay? And you need to start speaking. And they're going to give you about 2 minutes or so is a good response for that section of the test. So the advice I have on the question card that they're going to give you, there's going to be a main question that they ask you. Okay, so it could be something like, let me think, something like, talk about a teacher or talk about a person from your childhood whom you admire very much. Okay, so that's going to be like the basic question that they give you in that section. You're going to be thinking about a teacher you admire. And then they're going to give you 3 bullet points, 3 points that you need to talk about. And below that, they're going to give you another question, a basic question you're supposed to answer. My advice for this section of the test is to just simply follow the format of the question. So you want to, first of all, introduce what you're going to talk about. So in my question, I would say, a person from my childhood whom I admire very much is my second grade teacher, Mrs. Underwood. Okay, so, or whoever the person was, right? And so you're introducing the topic and then go through each of the bullet points and answer that question in order. Okay, you should have at least a sentence or two answer for each of those bullet points. And then at the bottom, the basic question that comes at the very end, you should be able to talk more at length about that question after you've answered the bullet point. So it'll be something like, talk about where you met that person, how you knew that person, how long you knew this person, and then talk about reasons why you admire that person. Okay, so the last part of your response, you're going to talk about reasons why you admire this teacher that I'm talking about, okay? So the organization is what's key, okay? You want to follow each of those bullet points, answer them one by one, and then stay focused. That last question is going to tell you what you should answer. So reasons why you admire the teacher. Okay, well, can you quickly think of 2 reasons why you admire the teacher? Okay, and try to list those, try to mention those at the end. Okay, so what I advise then, I should have mentioned this earlier, in that minute that you have to prepare your response, focus more on that last question, the question that comes below the bullet points. Spend your minute thinking about how you're going to respond to that, because the bullet points are already there for you. You don't need a reminder about what to say. You just need to look at them as you're talking and remember to include that information in your response. Use your planning time to think about that last question at the very bottom of the topic card in order to think through what you want to say right at the very end. Okay. Tell us a daily habit we can develop to improve our IELTS band score. Okay, this is easy, but it's easy to answer. It's hard for you. Okay. Study vocabulary every single day. You should be trying to learn about 10 to 15 new words every day. Okay, keep a list, keep a journal, be organized about your vocabulary study. Okay, so I like to keep a notebook, and in my notebook, I will write a simple synonym or maybe a short definition for each word. And what I have my students do is you're going to keep that notebook every day from your reading that you're doing, when you're listening to English. Hopefully you're trying to expose yourself to as much English as possible every single day. And you're writing down words throughout the day. So you make sure your notebook is small, or use your phone, or some way that's going to be easy for you to have to be able to write down words just in the course of your day, right? And then at the end of each day, or maybe in the morning, whatever works for you, don't spend a long time studying. Plan to spend about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Look over your list. It's going to get longer and longer and longer before test day, and that's fine. As you study 10 minutes each day, 15 minutes each day, your vocabulary list, you're going to remember some. You're going to have to review others, right? And as time goes on, the more times you review all those words, the more repetitions you have, the deeper it gets inside your mind, okay? And the faster you're going to remember those and use those words well when you need to use them in the writing section, or when you read them in the reading section, wherever it is, okay? So don't spend an hour studying vocabulary, a couple times a week. Spend 10 minutes every single day. Write down words as you hear them. It's a great way to learn vocabulary, and vocabulary knowledge is one of the keys to boosting your band score and bumping it up from one level to the next for the IELTS. So that's definitely the thing you should be doing every day as you prepare for the exam. Okay, is it hard to progress from a 5 band score to a 6 band score? What is crucial? Okay, yes, it's hard. Anytime you bump up a band score on IELTS, a full band score, it's a significant achievement. But that's not to say you can't do it, especially for students who have not spent much time studying about the format of the test and some strategies for the test. You can definitely bump up a band score fairly quickly. Okay. So if you have not yet studied how to strategize for the reading section, or what the key strategies are for the listening section, and not even strategies, the listening section is hard. It's hard to do even for native speakers, because you're listening to a lecture or a conversation of some kind, and you have to answer all those questions as you're listening. Okay, and that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do. It takes practice. So if you are someone, if I'm not sure, what the situation is for the person who asked this question, but if you're at the very beginning of your studies, then getting to know the test, learning strategies, yes, you can bump it up quickly. Okay, now if you've taken the test a lot and you have spent a long time studying for the IELTS and you're very familiar with the exam, then bumping up from 5 to 6 is going to potentially be tougher. That is the bump you need is simply from improving your English skills. And as you know, improving your English skills takes time. There's no quick and easy way to really boost your skills. But you can do things. First of all, if you are one of the people who've taken the test over and over and you really feel you know it well, and you're still not getting the score you want, focus on the 1 or 2 sections that are the hardest for you. Identify what the problems are that you're facing. So if it's the writing section, consider, we talked earlier about the speaking section, finding someone to sort of a native speaker to ask you questions or whatever. Well, consider getting, some specific help with grammar or with some other piece of your writing that might be pulling your score way, way down. Okay. So it might be time, if you've taken the test a bunch of times, to consider some new way of studying, getting some extra help with your English. Okay. Everybody's situation is going to be so different with this. It really does depend on your situation, how much history you have studying for IELTS and all of that. I would definitely recommend for everyone, even if you are shooting for like a band 8, 8.5, 9, even if you're extremely proficient in English, leading up to the test day, it does help to continue studying vocabulary, to work on your fluency, right? Every day, a little bit of, even if they're not a native speaker who you can practice with, just being around English every single day as much as possible, so that your brain is sort of processing things in English. That can go a long way too. So not a very specific answer. It really does depend on your situation, exactly how you're going to make that bump up a full band score. Okay, during the speaking test, will the examiner focus on the vocabulary I use? How can I incorporate some good vocabulary when I speak? Great question. Yes, your examiner will be focusing on your vocabulary. Vocabulary, it is one of the things you're definitely scored on the IELTS speaking rubric. But vocabulary is tricky. Okay, so what they're looking for is a number of things. Okay, they first of all want to see that you are using words in a natural way, in a way that native speakers would use them. Okay, so one piece of advice I would give is, if you're not very comfortable with a word, right? It's maybe something new, and you're not entirely sure how to use it grammatically or in what situations it's going to be correct. That might be something you want to avoid on the speaking section if possible, because they will notice if you're using words incorrectly, and if it sounds like it's sort of an unnatural place where you're using. So I have I'm saying this because I have some students who try to use as many very advanced words as they possibly can. That can be great. If you can use some advanced words and use them correctly, you feel comfortable with them when they're used and what they mean, do it. Your examiner will reward you for that. But if you make mistakes, even with very advanced words, those are mistakes and those will count you down. So make sure you're comfortable with the words that you're using. How can you incorporate good vocabulary then beyond that? So I think, well, a basic thing is that you need to be practicing. You need to be practicing lots and lots of speaking questions and working on your vocabulary. So the nice thing about the speaking section is that, even though you're not going to know the exact question they're going to ask you, often the topics are quite similar, except when you get to part 3. The last part of the test, I think it's very difficult to kind of make any kinds of predictions about the general sort of vocabulary you would need for that, okay? The last section is the hardest one. But for sections, 1 in particular, the first section in particular, and even to some degree the second section, the topics that they talk about tend to be quite similar, right? So talking about family, talking about your hometown, talking about subjects you enjoy in school, okay? So one key to using good vocabulary is to practice a lot of those questions and to study vocabulary as you do it. Pay attention to your vocabulary. And you should be recording yourself. You should be thinking about the words you use and thinking about whether you can say something better or with different vocabulary as you go back through and listen to yourself, listen to the recordings you had. Okay, so again, on the blog, we've got all those speaking practice questions that you can use. Got a speaking resource there. I think we posted it earlier in the comment section. We can put it there again. That is a great resource for practicing vocabulary because you get to practice all those types of questions you're likely to see in that section. Okay, let's see. Well, it's already 9:40, but I'm feeling good. I hope you're feeling good. Let's just keep going. We're going to go the whole hour here. I've got lots of questions, and I don't want to miss anybody's questions. I might get some water here, but let's see. Okay, so next question. I make silly mistakes in spelling words I know the meaning of. What is the best practice to overcome this problem? Oh, yeah, I get this. You're not alone, first of all. English spelling is hard, okay? Many of our words, as you know, are not spelled exactly the way they sound, and then we've got all kinds of crazy rules for how certain things are spelled. And anyway, it's a mess. So if spelling's a problem for you, it should be part of your vocabulary study. Okay, so that I talked earlier a few minutes ago about keeping a vocabulary journal. Well, you should add to that if you're having trouble with spellings, you should add to that words that you also have difficulty spelling, even if you know the word very well and you can use it when you're speaking fluently and no problem. If you're making consistent mistakes with that word and spelling it, it should be in a journal somewhere, okay, on your computer or writing it down by hand so that you can review those later. One of the things that happens to many students, especially if they're practicing writing on a computer, is that they use their spell checker to identify mistakes. Oh yeah, and so you got a little red line under the word that's misspelled. You notice it for a second, you say, oh yeah, I forget, that's how you spell that word. Then you click something and it goes away, okay? And you don't have to think about it again. Well, you're probably gonna make the same mistake again if you just use your spell checker, okay? So if you're struggling with spelling, avoid the spell checker, okay? Or if you use it, stop what you're doing, take that word that you misspelled and put it in your journal somewhere so that you can review it later. Okay, if spelling's a big problem for you, you're going to have to create a system. And I think writing down words that you misspell, having some place to review them, a few minutes every day. Again, you don't need to spend hours and hours on this. Nobody has time for that. spend 10, 15 minutes every day or every other day going over your spelling list. It can make a huge difference in your spelling, all the repetitions of seeing those words over and over again. So that would be my top advice for people who are having trouble with spelling. And it's a lot of folks out there have the same issue. Okay, I always get stuck speaking. How can I feel more confident? Yeah, another thing. The speaking test is is intimidating for some students. It's kind of frightening. You're going all by yourself into a room with that examiner, and some examiners are very cheerful and friendly and welcome you, and others are very businesslike, and and it can be kind of scary. So what can you do? Well, I think one of the general things, and this is also something I've said earlier today, is that one of the best ways to overcome being nervous is preparation, right? Being prepared for that section. So, what does that mean? Well, you should first of all really understand the section. Do lots and lots of practice questions. Okay, lots of speaking practice questions, so you know what kinds of questions they're going to ask you, how long you should be responding for, and practicing also gives you a sense of timing. Okay, so section 2 of the test, you're supposed to, a good answer, you're going to speak for, about 2 minutes, right? So what does it feel like to speak for 2 minutes? Okay, that's something you learn by practicing and having a timer there. Okay, and the more you practice those questions and go through them, the better feel you have for the test. Okay. Secondly, though, and this is related. So each of the three sections of the test are going to be basically the same every time, right? You're going to begin in section 1 with everyday, daily life questions. Section 2, you're going to have your sort of monologue, the speech you have to give. And section 3, you're going to have more difficult questions related to the topic of your part 2 speech. Okay. So one of the best things to overcome being nervous is to be really, really good at section 1. Okay. They're going to ask you daily life questions. And if you are prepared for those because you have studied them, because you have answered many, many, many of them, okay, often after a few minutes of speaking, right, a lot of my students say, okay, I was nervous at first, but then things got better towards the middle or end of the test. I wasn't nervous. It was still hard, but I wasn't as nervous as I was at the beginning. So prepare for section 1. Make sure you get started off with a really strong set of answers for part 1, and you can ensure that by studying lots and lots of those part 1 questions. And then hopefully your nerves will decrease a little bit for later sections of the test. Okay, so practice a lot and practice specifically the section 1 test, part 1 of the speaking test, and that can really be a big help for nervousness. Okay, so in the reading section, in the reading section of the computer-based test, can we go over all the reading passages and its questions before we answer? Or will it appear one by one? So yes, you're still supposed to. That's one of the keys to IELTS is you're supposed to look at the whole set of questions at once. And the computer-based version is doing something new with their questions. So many of the question types, like for example, if you've got a set of multiple choice questions. You're going to see the question over to the right, and then you have to click on the sentence, the question, to see the answer choices. And they do this so you can view all the questions in one little box there. If they didn't have that, then you'd have to scroll down to see all the questions and answers. So the answer is yes and no. You can see the questions. You can't see all the answer choices for some types of questions all at once. Okay. If you want to, let's see. I don't have the link available, but So the official IELTS website does have sample questions for computer-based tests, and you should take a look at those reading ones because they give you samples of all the different types of questions that you might see on computer-based test. After we're done here today, I can go look for that, and I can post a link somewhere in the comment section. I think I can post something below, so I'll go find that, and we'll put a link to that, to those official questions for computer-based tests. But you'll see there that yes, you can see the questions, you just can't see all the answer choices for some of them. So that takes some practice and getting used to if you're going to take the computer-based test. Okay, let's see. Are there any common topics in writing, academic? Well, yes, but I would not advise studying particular topics for the writing section. The topics do change quite a bit, and you might spend a lot of time studying for a particular topic, and it may not be, then what happens if you get something completely different on the test? So the common topics, well, they're often things that are about, that might be somewhat sort of mildly controversial, okay, sometimes for task 2 in particular questions. So, but it's not going to be anything, that's going to really cause a lot of emotional response from students. It's going to be, what are the advantages or disadvantages of working from home instead of working in the office, something like that, right? Nobody has really strong opinions about that. That's the kind of thing you're going to have to answer. But to identify, what are the common topics, I don't really want to push you down that path to study particular topics, because it's unlikely you'll be able to predict exactly what it is. It's much better to practice the style of response that you're supposed to write. Okay, so we talked about it earlier today about how some task 2 essays are, you're writing about advantages or disadvantages. Some task 2 questions just ask you a series of like 3 questions in a row that you're supposed to answer. And you need to really become familiar with those styles of questions, because you'll be able to use your life knowledge and what you know about the topic they're asking you to answer the question. So it's much more important, I would say, to learn how to organize your questions, how to respond to those questions, rather than to try to predict which topics they might ask you about. Let's see. We're coming down to the bottom of our list here of questions. Do you have book recommendations for writing help? Sure. Yes, I can put, let's see, I think the best thing for that one, because I'm going to mess up the titles if I say them here, is to put links to those. I will put some links to those at the bottom after we're done here. So you can look for those. I'll give you some ideas about writing help. I think, I always advise students, if you can, to get one of the official prep books, like from Cambridge, for example. They've got a lot of them. Unfortunately, they're kind of expensive in US dollars. You can buy new ones usually for about $50, but you can also find them used online for much cheaper. What I like about them is that they give sample questions, and then many of them will give sample responses as well that you can look at and get an idea about how they're scored. So that's one thing. The question you asked, though, is about writing help, just improving writing. And so if the question is about how to become a better writer, not just for IELTS, then that's a different question. And there would be a whole other set of books that I would recommend for that. Okay, so I'll put some ideas after we're done here this morning. I will put some ideas down below of things you can look at for writing help. Okay, let's see. Continue with lots of writing questions here. Let's continue with those on that theme. Please give some tips to improve the writing score while doing self-study at home. Okay, so I think the question here is probably one of the problems you might be facing with self-study is that you're not getting feedback. You're unsure possibly, um, what grammar mistakes you're making or how to score yourself on the rubric. Okay, so yes, that's a problem. That is something, if you're self-studying and you're not getting any feedback at all, then you're probably wondering, well, what's my score and how am I doing? Okay, so what I would recommend for you, if that's your situation, you don't have a teacher or access to a teacher or somebody who can review your writing, then first of all, what you should do is get the IELTS rubric. Okay, the rubric is the thing they use to score your writing. And you can find that on the official IELTS websites. They have it in all kinds of places. But if you search online for IELTS band score descriptors, you're going to get the band score descriptors for task 1 and task 2. Okay, for both general training and academic. You can find those quickly. You have to become familiar with those. What are they looking for? Okay, you can't really understand how to improve unless you know what they're looking for and what they want you to do better with. Okay, and so you're going to get those band score descriptors. And if some part of it is unclear, then you're going to have to do some research. If you're self-studying, you don't have a teacher to help you out, you're going to have to go online. Okay, they're talking in the coherence and cohesion section of the rubric about lots of different things you're supposed to do. Well, you may need to go online, sign up for some online course, potentially. Magoosh, we have a lot of things to help you with this kind of thing, but there are many other resources too. And you can do some research on the rubric and figuring out what they're asking you to do and what those different things on the score sheet are requiring of you. Okay, and then once you have that understanding, you can look at your own writing, you can try to evaluate yourself, and then go online and find samples of IELTS writing. So again, on the official websites, they have some responses in most of the Cambridge or IELTS books that you might buy or get access to online. They will have sample essays for you to look at. Compare what you've written to what you see in those essay responses. Okay, again, just assuming you have nobody to help you, that's what I would recommend as a way to continue developing your skills. Okay, so let's see. I've got a couple of here. Reading tips. Let's go to reading. Reading tips for getting from a 6.5 and reading tips to get to an 8.5. Okay, that's a big jump. That's a big jump in reading. And so I would say if the idea for getting a 6 point, I think the student wants to know, I'm sorry, maybe these are separate questions. Okay, so these are separate questions that came in. I misunderstood the question. I thought the student was asking, one student was asking how to get from a 6.5 to an 8.5, but we had two separate questions on how to get a 6.5 and then how to get an 8.5. Okay, well, the answer is very similar for both of these. As with all sections of the IELTS, vocabulary is extremely important. Okay, so you need to be studying vocabulary to do well on the reading section. They're going to be testing you. Almost all of the questions are vocabulary questions in some way because they're paraphrasing something in the reading passage over to the question. You almost never find the exact same language in the questions and in the reading passage. If you do find the exact same language or words, sometimes that's a clue that maybe they're trying to fool you into choosing the wrong answer choice, okay? So vocabulary is huge, and it's something that anyone at any level needs to be working on daily in order to improve for the reading section. Okay, so other than that, getting from 6.5 to 8.5, or just thinking about them separately here, you're going to have to master each of the question types. Okay, so understanding, without even have to read the directions, you understand how to answer short answer questions. You understand how to answer true, false, not given questions. Okay, you know the directions, you know what you're supposed to do. You don't have to think about it. So what I'm saying is you learn about the section, you learn about the test. If you want to get a perfect score or up really high score in the 8.5 area, those folks not only have very strong English, but they have learned about the test and understand the format very, very well. Okay. The second key then is something I talked about way at the beginning of the hour here, which is to master skimming and scanning skills. Okay, I'll repeat what I said earlier here this morning, which is that it is not really advisable at all to read carefully on the reading section. Okay, don't read these essays or articles like you're studying for your classes at school. It's a different activity. You have to go really quickly by skimming for what the basic idea of the text is and then scanning for answers. It's a very specific set of skills. And again, I'll repeat what I said earlier in the session, which is that if you go to the Magoosh IELTS blog, we've got a guide to the reading section. It's free. You can go there and learn about skimming and scanning strategies. Those are the things that the top scorers have usually mastered, because you just don't have time to answer carefully on the reading section. You have to master those speed skills in order to get the really great scores. Okay, let's see. I think we've got time for about one or two more questions. Okay, I have an immense problem with the reading segment, especially the true, false, not given questions. Okay, yes, they're the hardest ones. And so many students have trouble with true, false, not given. Okay, so the key is these are different from, so you probably have taken lots of tests with true and false questions before. Okay, and it's important, really important to understand how true, false, not given is different from those questions, and to have a lot of practice trying to answer this particular type of questions. Remember, what you're looking for in true, false, not given questions is that, does the text support the statement that you have in the question? Okay, can you find that information in the text? Okay, if you can find something in the text that confirms the statement, you put true. If you find something that goes against the statement, you have to find something in the passage that actually says the opposite thing, or it makes the statement incorrect. Okay, so there has to be something there that actually says the opposite. Okay, that's false. All right, so it can be the opposite. It can just make the statement untrue or wrong. Then you put false. It's only when you absolutely can't find the answer, the text says nothing about it, that you put not given. And that's the hardest part, is for students to recognize when it should be false and when it should be not given. Furthermore, not given ones are so frustrating because you can spend a lot of time searching for the answer and it's just simply not there, right? The text doesn't say anything about it, and that's why you're answering not given. Okay. So on this section, don't lose valuable time by searching for things that are not there. If you're searching for an answer, you can't find something that agrees with the statement or disagrees with the statement that you're reading in the question. My advice, if you're spending a lot of time on that, is to put not given and to move on. Don't lose points on easier questions later in the reading test because you spent so much time searching for answers for your not given questions, okay? So the two tips for this are: make sure you understand the question type very, very well, understand what answering true means, false means, and what not given really means, okay? And then don't waste time. Don't waste time looking for not given answers that aren't there. If you've spent already 30 seconds, a minute, you're not finding the answer, put not given and move on, okay? Okay, I think we are out of time here. Thank you all for all of your great questions. We are going to be following up if you bookmark this here, and we're going to put some links to things down below that we talked about in this hour, and you're going to have access to those resources that we've discussed throughout the hour here with all your questions. So thanks again for all your questions, and hopefully this has been a helpful time to get your questions answered here about the IELTS test. We'll see you all sometime soon.